wish I could, apparently Saturday is no longer a good time to have a meeting. But we need to do something. Angela?
By the way, Miss Estelle right there, she is a classmate of Uncle LG.
Really?
Yes. She's, if Uncle LG was still alive,
Bonnie,
yeah, that's a great aunt of ours.
Where did Bonillo's name come from?
Made
Is that
up.
a family
Made
name?
up. 3 of the 5 children had totally made up names.
Oh, now my.
Merlene, there's no record of ever a Merlene. Bonillo, no record of ever a Bonillo.
Now,
Prior.
my dear, dear, dear friend LG.
That was actually his middle name, and it was E-L-G-E-E, totally made up.
Well,
Technically,
we all loved him, and the boys in our class were all jealous of LG.
by the way, this is my brother sitting right here.
yeah, I remember LG well.
Oh, I'm so glad to meet you.
Classmate.
He was my godfather.
I loved LG. My whole class loved LG. We had a little high school sorority called the Subdale. Okay. When Johnny Hirsch got her convertible, we all 14 would get in it, and LG. Now, John Boani, Walter, don't tell me I can't remember that. Charles Hardy, Albert Clary, all those would get mad at us. Why is LG riding with you? Because LG is so sweet to all of us. We all love LG. He was, you could cry your heart out to LG. And he gave you a compassionate listening. He was gentle, but we always thought of him as the other man in our lives. Whoever we were dating and all that.
As an older man, he was
Not necessarily, but we looked on him as our male friend that we could always depend on. He had your back for you.
As an older man,
No, he was.
Wait. He did not become a nice man.
He what?
As an older man, he did not become a nice man.
Well, I'm not going to go into the story of that. But we knew when he called us, because Catherine Budd and I and Aramie and Janice and all, we'd get calls from LG. Now, the one thing we knew is his wife was not in the house, because she controlled the phone
Oh, no question.
and everything.
She
and
controlled
everything
everything.
else. Huh?
I loved her to death. She controlled everything, though. She used to complain that there were too many Mexicans in San Antonio. And I used to tell her, and Marcy,
Move.
they were there first.
Exactly. Exactly. But now she would, hey cousin, she would come to our gatherings.
Not many times.
Well,
Not many times.
well, all but the last one. We managed to get him because we would call him and appoint him something. But he was our good friend.
That's cool.
And I can see Bob Casanova with his 6'3" frame with it saying, why is it that LG is with y'all and we are not? Well, Bob, think about it.
We liked LG, we didn't like Bob Casanova.
Well, I can remember when Bob joined us in the 2nd grade. His daddy came here as the agent for the agricultural program, whatever y'all call that. And I can remember this tall man with this tall boy coming into the 2nd grade, Miss Andrews' class. And we had a new member of our class. And it didn't take Bob but a few days to know everybody, and everybody knew Bob. But we loved LG. He was our...
Oh, I loved LG. I didn't like what he did to my mother, but that's not. I was fine with LG.
Well, we hated
Robert had a stroke.
that he
He's
wasn't
in,
able to be with us more often.
Robert,
Well, on with the show.
All right,
Robert
let
Tuzak,
me get this and then,
and that's all.
I'm sorry that things are so
I'm over
slim
here in
this time, but
Opelousas and, I'm waiting
I've been
for-
trying to find out whether we should
Right,
meet at a
right.
different time. But we're going to tape this and then we're going to be able to share this.
Yes.
All right. I was very taken with Michael's presentation that first time because he rang a bell for me when he spoke of how easy he found it to be after he had worked. Of course, what he didn't share with us at first, and then we found out, was he was able to fall back on a life of collecting stuff. And that's what, at this age, it's too late for me to do because I didn't keep a diary, I didn't keep clippings, I didn't do those things that he did as a child. Who influenced you to do that?
Probably mostly my mother,
Leslie?
Leslie.
Now, I remember Leslie very well.
No, she wasn't here long.
Well, when you have, Wanda Bell and LG were both in my class.
Both, really?
That's right, I don't know how that came about. But all I know is they were both in my class, and I was close to both of them. And of course, we did business with Mr. Wynne, as did just about everybody in town. But Leslie impressed me very early on. She knew what she wanted to do.
Yes.
And I've never forgotten that, is she knew what she wanted to do.
Yes, she
And
did.
so many people at that time, including me.
She wanted to get away from her family.
You think that's it?
Oh, that was part of it.
Well, in that time and place, I guess most of us wanted to do something, you know.
She wanted to do something, she wanted to be a nurse.
Oh, yes.
She couldn't afford to be a nurse, but her aunt paid the money for it.
Who was the aunt?
Josephine Stuckey, Josephine Bim Stuckey. She lived in Baton Rouge. She had no children, so she adopted her eldest niece as her child.
Oh, how interesting. Well, as an aunt, who became the third
Josephine Bim
parent,
Stuckey.
as an aunt who became the third parent in all of my brother's families.
Sure.
I understand that because sometimes they don't have enough money
My
to spread
grandmother
around.
Anna Bim Whip, that was her older sister, right?
Yes.
Anyway, I'm delighted. I'm so sorry that we're so few. On the other hand, we're going to be able to ask questions and get more information this way. Michael, I'm impressed by, you sent me not only information about your books, but for the first time you sent me, and I didn't know what you had done as an adult in your life.
He's not through.
What?
He's not through.
Well, I hope none of us are through. But I was impressed with what you've done. And it seems to me not only did you have the feeling for family, because obviously very early on you became attracted to all this now. How your parents and siblings allowed you to keep your hoarded goods, I don't know. In Mason's family there were 5 children, and I remember one time giving each of them a trash basket because it had the celestial world on the thing with the sun and the moon and all of that. Now the other children used theirs as trash cans, but not Tom. He saved his treasures in the trash can. But he found a way to hoard from then. He was the youngest one. And today he's got all these things, and the other 4 are very jealous because, well, Tom has this, Tom has that. Tom was collecting from the time he was birthed with all of these things. Is there some gene you have?
Don't know.
Our mother rarely threw anything away. She would put it in a bag or a box and put it in the attic.
That was my father, all right. Anyway, it seems to me And then when you said, you went into a field where you research and you learn about people, and then you have to deal with them the way they are, and that's not easy. Because you had to deal with people who were not necessarily all good people. And so you learn to deal with negative and positive things, which I find very interesting, because it makes you look at the whole person. And that's one of the things that when we do research and we look back, sometimes we only want to see the good things. But the whole story has to be told with plus and minus and pictures. And that was the other thing. How did you manage to
Well,
get...
I'll just start my talking.
Anyway, so I'm giving you food for thought. Anyway, I am impressed with what this young man has been doing and is still doing.
And you can call me a young man.
Well, I can when you get to be 94.
I know, that's what I'm
Everybody else is
saying. You can call me a young man. Not my children don't call me a young man.
Well, sorry for them. One of these days they're gonna be sorry. Anyway, I'm so happy that you could come back. I'm so sorry that we're gonna be sharing this with so few people. But thank you for taping this, because we're gonna find out what this young man has to share with us.
Well, this young man is honored to be here. First of all, I've given talks before 500 people. I've given talks before 3 people. And what I've always said is whoever comes in is the best people. So all of y'all are the best people, and thank you for being here today. Miss Estelle, I love St. Landry Parish. I love Opelousas, love Lawtell. But Miss Estelle has got to be the unofficial lifetime Yambly Queen, because she is such a wonderful person. I have so many memories of my youth, my time in Opelousas. I spent a great deal of time, and my brother did too. But we are a little bit different in age, but I spent a great deal of time in Opelousas and St. Landry Parish and Lawtell when I was young. There's just so many things. I would spend several weeks at my grandmother's house. My parents travel. I was take a bicycle ride through downtown Opelousas. I was always interested in old things. So I would go spend time with Léonce Roos. Raise your hand if you know who he is. Okay, the older folks. He taught me a lot about kerosene lanterns, because he had a wonderful spot. I also went over to Ringrose Antiques and spoke and visited with Ruth Fontenot and became good friends with her. I went to the movies at the old theater on Courthouse Square, which is now the sheriff's office. I went with my cousins, the late Neal Whip, sad to say.
The Delta's still there. The Delta Theater is still there.
The building.
The building, yes.
Yes, the building.
Yeah, and I saw Ice Station Zebra in the summer of 1969. I even remember with Neil and Lisa's passed away also there. I used to go every Saturday night to the Southern Club, which is on the Lawtell Highway, for bingo. I actually went to the Yambly Drive-In once and played on, my brother I think actually also did the same thing. My grandparents' house, built in 1928, was in the corner of Madison and South Union Street. I always loved the story that the tents, the Union soldiers' tents were facing the other street, which is the one way, and I can't think of what it is. Union Street.
In Main Street.
Main Street.
Yeah.
And the Union soldiers used to march behind their tents. And that's where the name Union Street came from.
Really?
Yes, yes. But I have so many wonderful memories of Opelousas, but I'll save that for maybe a third talk in 2 years.
All right.
But what I wanted to talk about today is different. 2 years ago when I came and talked, I talked about my life in genealogy research. And the word genealogy I have always hated. It sounds like some sort of science or something. It reminds me of the word bibliography. And in high school and college, I hated making bibliographies. And so I will not, for the rest of the talk, yell at me if I say the word genealogy again, because I don't want to use genealogy. I want to use family history. And over the years, I have collected everything. Civil War relics, matchboxes, license plates, coins, stamps, pretty much everything you can imagine. That's why I now do the antique roadshow-like appraisal circuit. I'm going to be doing appraisals in Evangeline Parish Library in October, raising money for the library, for the society. And I do it everywhere else. I'm the chief appraiser in East Baton Rouge Parish. I've been doing that for 12 years now. But I've collected everything. But family history, look at the two words. Family, is there anything that's more interesting than family? And history, everybody likes history. We may not all like the same areas of history, but we all like history. So family history, can there be a hobby that's more suiting to humanity than family history? And family history, I've always hated when I've hear somebody say, well, my family is boring. I want to use curse words. What it is you've made no effort to research your family. I'm a volunteer at the Alexandria Genealogical Library, and I help people research all the time. And this older man came in one day, he was 70 years old, and he says, my grandfather did nothing. He did fight in World War I, but he did nothing, I mean, in his life. And it just kind of, I'm going to be blunt because I think y'all pissed me off. And I said, so I spent 3 hours, I pulled up all of his World War I records using various systems, and I talked about the different techniques 2 years ago. And by the end of the time, his grandfather was wounded twice during World War I, received 2 medals, was stationed in France. He fought in, I think, something like 7 battles, and was written up in the paper. He was, and everything. I was able to pull all this up for him, and he was absolutely aghast. He says, I never knew about this. I said, I had to say it. Did you ever make any effort to research it? No, I just never knew this. Everybody's family is interesting. They really are. And I talked about last time, on my last talk, about how I got interested. There's a lot of different sources. And yes, I had the advantage of becoming absolutely enamored when I was a teenager with history and family history and everything. But I have taught classes. I teach an advanced class and a beginner's class. And the beginner's class is usually people in their 60s-ish, 70s, retired. And they always tell me, oh, it's just too late. The old people are dead, and it's too late for me to do anything. And I said, you're absolutely wrong. And there's some easy techniques. Now, we can get into the more complicated things, and I have a feeling all of y'all have done most of y'all have done some genealogical research, and there's some complicated, but family history doesn't have to be hard. Now, on my father's side, I have 34 first cousins. Over the last 40 years, I have interviewed probably 27 or 28 of them. Some of them have been cooperative in family pictures and things like that. One of my techniques was, you only have one chance to see anybody. I don't care how old or how young they are, how near or how far, or how cooperative. You only have one chance to see somebody. Get everything you can out of them. Get every question answered. Copy it. I went over to my aunt's house, Aunt Helen, in Metairie, Louisiana. She had hogged up. You know, we all have these relatives who hog up a lot of stuff. You know, they're the ones who get all the fame. They were the closest person to the grandma or the grandpa, and they get a whole bunch of stuff. And good for them, and nobody else gets much of anything. Well, she had hogged up, she had stuff that she really didn't need to have on her brothers and sisters, but she had it all. Well, she wasn't going to, the stuff was the most precious stuff in the world to her. She wasn't going to let anything out of her hands. So I took a trip to New Orleans, spent 3 days at her house, and she wouldn't even let me go to the library by myself to copy things. So she would go to the library and she'd sit there and read a book while I'm copying stuff. I copied like 800 pages worth of the most priceless stuff in the world. And she sat there and she put everything back in the box, of course, and she knew her beloved children were going to care for this as the greatest treasures in her family. Of course, she never actually talked to them. But you know, children don't always say everything to their parent. When you tell your children, I've got all these family treasures, are they going to say, I don't want the stuff? No, they're going to say, Mom, we're going to love the stuff after you're gone. They're always going to say that.
I'm sitting in the meeting.
I'd like her to.
I'll call you back.
So,
Okay. Okay, I'm okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. All right.
you know, the
Sorry
children.
for the interference.
It's all right.
My husband is concerned about me because I was having some problems before I left the house.
It's good
I
when spouses
apologize.
are concerned.
Yeah, I've just
It's when
61
this-
years, you know.
It's when spouses are not concerned, that's when
Yeah.
there's a problem.
I'm sorry.
But I was saying my aunt, when you ask your children, are you going to take care of my stuff after I'm gone? They're always going to say good stuff. They're always going, yes, Mama, yes, Daddy, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to love and pressure. But that's not the truth. You really don't know. You've got to be the caretaker. So what happened? She left them all in the boxes. Now she died I visited her in 1998. She died in 2002. Now they left the house vacant. Everything was in the house. And so Hurricane Katrina comes to Metairie. They got the important stuff. What's the important stuff? The jewelry out of the house. They abandoned everything else. Everything flooded out. The most precious stuff I would have paid thousands of dollars for. Old papers and pictures. All destroyed. I got the copies. They were actually insulted. I had the copies. Tough manure. Just let's leave it at that right there. So the children, whatever she said, you got to have an end game. But before I get to that, I would like to talk a little bit about my books, and it's not to try to sell the books to you, but to try to give an idea about some of this. When I spoke 2 years ago, apparently I had two different books available. One was, this is the history of my mother's family, which is this is pretty much solidly St. Landry Parish. Now, notice how much stuff there is in here. It's a hell of a lot of stuff. Now, I'm going to be talking about at the end of this talk about how easy it is to publish a book. There is nobody, I don't care if you're missing your arms and legs, you can still publish a book. Yesterday, and let me tell the story, I'm going to be very brief. Yesterday, I helped this guy. This guy is a prominent person in Alexandria. He has secretaries. He wanted to do his own life history, an autobiography. Well, his secretaries had to come in and turn on his computers and show him how to do email all the way till he retired. He never could do so he never wrote a word. He dictated everything into a dictaphone and paid his secretaries to type his book for him. Okay, so eventually he had his book. He wanted to publish it. It was useless, but I helped him publish his book yesterday. There were some problems because the manuscript and how they typed it, but without him, I'm ever writing a single word on a sheet of paper. I published his book yesterday, his autobiography, 230 pages. Now, think about this. A person who has never written a single word has published an autobiography of themselves. So, now, what I want to point out about this book right here, I learned how to type in high school at what I called Cathedral Carmel, Cathedral High School, where my brother also attended. I did not maintain it. I type with one finger. This finger is upper lowercase. So I lay it on the left side of the keyboard, and this finger types everything. One finger typed this book and everything else you see here. And if an incompetent person like me, who cannot type, another example, can put out books like this, than anybody. So I've given you one example of a person who never wrote a word has published a book. Another example of a person who can only type with one finger has published all of these books. This book is on my mother's family. And what I did, and I'll mention this, I did mention this 2 years ago, not that any of y'all other than my wife and Ms. Perrault was here, but I made sure that when I designed this book on my mother's family from St. Landry Parish, that I had, by that time, I started genealogy research in 1971. So I've been doing it for a long time, 48 years. I have seen hundreds, thousands of books I've gone through, and I've seen every mistake made by every genealogist. I love these books that have the Jones family. So it's only the Jones family and all the lines. So when a person buys those books, you're simply one single line in that entire book. This is family histories of all the family. Again, remember, I avoided all the mistakes. These are all the family histories of the different families in this book. Probably some that are related to you all in this room right here. It's not this, you're either related to the Jones family or you're not. You got all of these family histories. And the index and the table of contents is as easy as possible. I tried to avoid the mistake. I made it clear. Those systems where you have generation A, B, 1, 2, 6, C. I guess I'm the stupidest person in the world. I can't figure that out. Can any of y'all figure that? It's all right if you can figure it out, raise your hand. Okay. Why are they doing these systems when decent people can figure it out? My father's book, which concentrates on New Orleans families, Point Capee families, some Texas families, came out to be 2 volumes. Each just had a little more information. And again, all the families are covered, last names, so you're either on there or not. Now, something new since last time I was here. My mother was crazy. Do you disagree? No, I don't hear any disagreement. Do you disagree?
No.
Okay. My mother was a hoarder a bit. She saved lots of letters. My grandmother saved a lot of letters. But one of the key things is I was involved in saving letters and stuff as early as 1971. My grandmother used to give me a little envelope, and maybe my brother got it also at Christmas time every year, with a little $5 note inside. And as a young child, I couldn't wait to pull that $5 note and throw her little Christmas card away with her signature and everything. But around 1971, and that's what I attribute to the beginning family history interest. When I got the Christmas 1971 envelope, which I still have, I pulled that $5 note, but I realized my grandmother wasn't going to be around forever. I saved the little card, you've seen those little envelopes, and the envelope. I still spent the $5. I wasn't going to say that. I needed the $5, but I saved the card, and I attribute that. And I helped every letter that came into me from 1971 on that was from a relative, I also saved. Because everything was documentation of history, a moment in time. A moment in time. Well, my mother in the mid-1960s, her handwriting was a little bit hard. My father's handwriting was a little hard at times. She decided, for whatever reason, to start typing every letter. And although she saved tons of letters that she received before then, and my father did too, she started typing not only every business letter, every personal letter she ever wrote. I mean, if it was personal, even to me, it was all typed. And she started typing my father's letters. But when you type a letter or handwrite a letter, you mail it out, it's gone, people read it, they throw it in the garbage, it's finished, there's no evidence it ever existed. But she kept a carbon copy. And she saved all the carbon copies. And when my brother and I were helping her move out of her house in Myrtle Place to her condo, I grabbed up all the envelopes of carbon. I almost just threw them away. There was so much. I estimate there was 2,100 letters. did one of the most important things. I saved them. I didn't look at them. Also, my mother and father wrote to each other at LSU Medical School in 1943, love letters. She wrote him, he wrote her. They saved each other's letters. She put them all in the bag, and I found them in the attic. And I didn't tell my mother I'd found them because she would have thrown them away because she was kind of crazy. But I saved the carbon copies. I never read the love letters or looked at the carbon copies until after I finished the first books. And I started reading them. And I said, oh my God, I can't believe the people she wrote. She had a little business called Maison Treasure, which is French for treasure house, where she had obtained the patent for the official Evangeline spoon. She opened up a business. She corresponded with people all over the world, but every business letter was a personal letter with gossip. She talked about Lafayette people. She talked all about Opelousas. There's about probably 30 to 40% of these books right here is about Opelousas people. Now, everything she said wasn't kind. She talked, my brother knows exactly what I'm talking about. She was blunt as hell. Now, these letters are heavily critical of me, but I don't feel so bad because they're heavily critical of my brother and my sister. My sister is not interested in family history, so she's never read the critical letters about her that are published in the book, that are available in Amazon books, that anybody in the world could read about her. So that's tough for her. You know, sometimes you may want to read stuff that's published. But long story short, she wrote the president of Guatemala wanting his autograph, so she typed up a 3-page with no space letter talking about local gossip. She talked about national things, politics, the gas crisis, politicians, money, everything, but she talked about people. It is absolutely it's absolutely fascinating. She talked about her schoolmates at Opelousas High School and her childhood, Loli Shashri and Rosamond Lopez and everything.
My goodness.
She talked about Opelousas. These letters are the most fascinating things I've ever read in my life. And every once in a while when I'm bored at night and there's nothing good on TV, I'll open up one of these books and read some of her letters. I'm just going to read just 3 minor excerpts. You see how thick this is and how many letters there is? I published less than 10% of it. Oh, there's a ton more. I will mention one thing before I read the 3 excerpts. My father worked in 1947 at the St. Landry Parish Clinic and medical clinic. And I was really kind of shocked, and maybe I shouldn't have been because I am a student of history.
I didn't know that.
I know, but you haven't read all the book yet because it's in there. There's lots of good stuff. On Tuesdays, he would see the white patients. And on Thursdays, he would see the colored patients. The colored patients were not allowed, even if it was an emergency, to come in on the white patient day and vice versa. I was absolutely shocked about the segregation that they weren't allowed to be in the same lobby at the same time for free medical services. I guess I shouldn't be because, well, things are not perfect today by far, but it just was a reminder, said it's all in here. But I'm going to read just a couple of little excerpts with y'all's permission. The first one, my parents went to LSU Medical School together. My mother became a nurse, my father became a medical doctor. There's no reason to write letters. Well, she would go home on weekends and at the Christmas holidays and so forth. And so they met in August of 1942, but the first letter that survives was from January, and I assume Mother was still at Christmas holiday. And apparently they had a fight at Christmas time. So this is the first letter that basically survives. Postmark, January 4th, 1943. By the way, they used to pick up mail 3 times a day in New Orleans. The stuff you learn. So there was a time on the postmark. January 4th, 1943, 11 a.m., New Orleans. That's the postmark. Sunday night. Dear Leslie, This is just a note to try to perform one gentlemanly act. I guess it took something like this to make me realize what you meant by the subject has changed. Only thing, there has been no changed subject. I like you as much and more now than ever before. However, you are correct and have a good reason for breaking up with me. When I think about it, it does seem as if I go too far when I kiss you. I have to admit that my actions have been ungentlemanly like. I have only one excuse. I have never gone with a girl that I liked before. In fact, this is the first time I have ever gone steady, and I suppose I just did not know any better. Leslie, I apologize, I am sorry. I really meant no harm, and God knows my intentions towards you were only for the best. I am not asking to be reconsidered, but only for you to accept my apology, because you are really too good for me. As ever, Ed. I'm glad they made up and got married, because I wouldn't be reading to you today. You'd have a better speaker today. Here's another excerpt. This is from Mother. Postmarked July 19th, 1943, 1 p.m. Opelousas. Sunday night. Dear Eddie, I didn't want to tell you this over the telephone because I preferred to write. Now remember, this is the middle of the war. I was riding with Lola Lee, Shashery, and several girls, and naturally, they wanted to pick up some soldier boys. I couldn't very well say, bring me home. Well, we ended up each with a soldier. I promise, Eddie, I didn't even dance, and especially not kiss him. We had a friendly chat while the others danced. It was at the Opelousas High School gym. That was Saturday night. Sunday, somewhat of the same thing happened. Lola Lee enjoys the company of the soldiers. We had 2 soldiers for dinner. That is all. They left at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Mama invited them in because she thought they were very nice. They were sort of on the bashful side. First time they had ever been out of camp in 6 months. If you want to get angry at me, go ahead. I will not be able to stop you or blame you. And it goes on. One more little excerpt. Let's see, where am I? This is my father writing to his parents, July 27, 1943. Monday, dear Mom and Dad, boy, did I have a swell time over the weekend. They sure treated me nice in Opelousas. I had fried chicken for Saturday, fried chicken for supper Saturday night, and fried chicken for dinner Sunday. They served roast beef with the chicken. You can eat both or either one. All of the vegetables were off the farm in Lawtell. Leslie's family lives in Opelousas on one of the main streets. They have a very pretty house there. They have 2 large farms out in the country where they raise cotton, corn, potatoes, beans, tomatoes, etc. They seem to be rather well off. Not really. They had just bought a 1943 Ford touring car Sunday. They drove us to Baton Rouge, where we had dinner at Leslie's aunt, Josephine Bim Stuckey. Her mother loaned me the car the whole time I was there, and we drove everywhere. But I just want to choose out a couple of letters. It's amazing what she wrote. It's amazing what she talked about. Several people have bought the books, even that are not related to the family, and they've just enjoyed the hell out of the books. After I finished the what I call the correspondence books, over all these years, every time I visit a relative, I talked about earlier that you only have, when you visit a relative and have a chance to copy pictures or something. I developed my own little little development studio. I'd have a tripod over the old picture. This is the old days. There was no such thing as computers. I had the picture on a tripod, and I'd bring it with me and take pictures at people's houses. And I'd go home and develop it myself because I couldn't afford the drugstore developing and mailing them off because they were too expensive. The long story short is, I developed a negative library, which I still have. I have, I would say, 4,000 to 5,000 negatives that of old pictures I've copied, and I've got them developed by sorted out by envelopes, and I'm very proud of them. But you know, what good is all that? You got to have. Every once in a while, somebody wants a copy of a picture, and it was a pain in the butt, to be honest with you. I'd take it over to the drugstore or Walmart or the drugstore, copy it, then ask them for money because you know you don't want to give away everything because it's too costly. And I do this. I got to a point at one point about 5 years ago. I was doing it about every 4 to 5 to 7 days, bringing negatives over, copying them so somebody get. And I was happy to do it and help them, but it was a pain. I said, and when I started publishing these books, it says, why not I just publish my whole family album? I don't need the originals anymore. I can deposit safely the originals, and I'm going to talk about endgame for your hobby a little bit. And dang, how easy was it? I'm going to grab just one of the books. I'm in the process. It's going to take me about 20 volumes. And at first, I tried to publish all the pictures in one book, one humongous book. It was very difficult to keep the pictures balanced and loading in PDF and JPEG and all this other computer mess. I'm not going to get into all that. And then I realized, you know, light bulb over your head. The Smith and Jones family. The Smith people will only want pictures of the Smith family. The Jones people, I'm just making up last name, only want pictures of the Jones family. Why do I have to have just one book? The Smith people, I'll put a book out of my Smith pictures in the Smith book. So the Smith people can have just their pictures. And the book will be cheaper. And I did this, and I'm doing this right now in the process. This particular one is the Whip family of Louisiana, 1896. I think this is like a $12 or $14 book. My wife has the price. But if you're interested in the Whip family, it's every picture with a commentary from me explaining who the people are and the importance, and it relates. I don't give the biographies because I already have the biographies in the other book. And boy, have these become very, very popular because you don't have, you know, the old pictures are falling apart, and take care of them, and sometimes they're very small, but when you publish them on the computer, you can take a small picture like this and blow it up. This picture is like this big. You can blow it up big and it's clear. And you know how you don't touch pictures? I can touch it. And it's going to always look good. Sunlight's not going to get it because it's always going to be in the book. I gave a talk at the Evangeline Parish Genealogical Society a month ago, and I'm going to brag just a little bit on myself. One of the ladies stood up and said, "You are absolutely a genius for this," and I'm going to do that to mine. I'm going to now give all these pictures to properly, carefully selected archives so that my legacy. What good is doing genealogical research if everything is shoveled out into garbage bags when you die? And I'm going to talk about endgame in a little bit. So basically, I'm in the process of publishing, and I'm going to talk about publishing in a minute also because it's so damn easy. Well, there's a series of books, and I finished on my mother's side, and now I'm finishing up on my father's side. It'll take about 25. I want to talk about endgame.
What?
Endgame. Now, there was a movie called Avengers Endgame recently, but my endgame is about genealogists. I give talks and teach classes on genealogy all the time, and it doesn't matter what age. I'll ask, what is your plans? I'm going to ask Mr. Phillips, if you don't mind. I'm not singling you out, but Mr. Phillips, what's your ultimate endgame on your research? I assume you've been doing genealogy, family history research.
Well, excuse me. I'm interested in my family tree to affect the whole family.
Okay, but what's your end game? You have to have a goal. What is your goal?
Publish one day.
Okay, what is one day? I understand, I'm not trying to
The last
embarrass
20
you.
years, right, exactly. I'm just,
Can you tell me kind of like an estimated about how old you are? I mean, I know you're not 20 years old.
No, I'm 79.
Okay, you're 79 years old. I'm 62. You're 79, well, basically 62. 79. When is one day coming?
That should have been,
Huh?
that should have been 20 years ago already.
Yes. So how about tomorrow morning? How about tomorrow afternoon you publish a book? I'm going to combine my talk about publishing and endgame. I can go home right now. Publishing is so easy. I can go home right now, sit behind a computer, type up 3-4 pages of what I've talked about today, that I've had the pleasure of meeting. I talked with Estelle, I talked with Mr. Bertrand. I could go home and type it up right now. It'll take me about 15 minutes, 3 or 4 pages. I can then take the file, open up my KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, publish it it's taken me as little as 17 minutes, publish it. If I had Amazon Prime, which is 2-day, order copies, it'll take 1 day for Amazon to make the final review. So I could publish the book this afternoon. Tomorrow is Sunday. By tomorrow afternoon, it should be approved by Amazon. Order it, and if I had Kindle...
No, it still takes 2 weeks.
Well, no, I know, but
To
if I had
print.
Amazon Prime, it would take 2-day delivery. I could have the book, I know you're going to argue, honey, but I could have the book by the middle of next week about my talk today. A book with a cover and it being advertised around the world that if you're in Japan, you could buy a copy. I talked about the man I helped yesterday publish a book who had never typed or wrote down one word. I talked about me who types with one finger. There is nothing to publishing a book on Amazon. It is easy. And actually, it doesn't cost anything. It's free. It's free. Now, if you want to buy copies, the author has to pay the minimal cost for the paper and everything. And you can actually make a profit, but I've never been interested in making family history, there's no profit, ultimately. But it's that easy. There is no excuse for anybody. So let me get back to my talk on endgame. Endgame. What you have spent, some of you have spent a lifetime of research. Now, quite frankly, when I published the books on my father and mother's family the last 2 or 3 years, I was not finished researching. There was always more to go. I could go another 50 years of researching. I've actually come up, I have actually quit researching, but I've actually accidentally even come up with new information on different branches. But I had to say, I'm 61 years old. I could die tomorrow. I'll look at the obituaries. I could die tomorrow. I have devoted my entire life to family history research. Am I going to let my children not interested in this? I'm realistic. I don't have to ask them. And I have talked to them, but they're kind. Yeah, we'll take care of you. No, I can't rely on that. I needed to take a stance. If I've devoted 47.5 years of my life to research, I'm not going to let myself. I have watched a friend of mine, Ed Reed from Baton Rouge. He had the most valuable stuff. He just dropped dead one day, and I actually watched this stuff. That his wife wouldn't let him. She said, I get to decide what his second wife did. I get to decide what I'm going to do with my husband's stuff. Nobody else is going to get it. And I watched the stuff because the folders busted, and I watched the stuff being shoveled into garbage bags. His whole legacy was gone because he had no end game. He was just going to research forever because he was going to live forever. I was adamant that I'm not going to waste. What good is all this if you're just going to research forever? So when I did my mother's book, my first book, today I have ended my research. Maybe my children might do it, very unlikely, maybe somebody else, but I'm going to preserve what I've done. All the interviews and visits and the hundreds of people. One thing when I was young, and it's one thing I'll repeat from 2 years ago, I visited hundreds of people. In total, with correspondence and telephone calls and everything, I probably have interviewed over 1,000 people. And I promised every single one I would have a book on the family. And 95% of them are dead now. And I personally, seriously felt this great weight on my shoulders that I was going to be a man of my word. Even though they're dead, I'm going to get these books out that maybe their children and grandchildren might be interested in, or not. But I'm getting these books out because all these interviews, I'm preserving their legacy. I read a fascinating article that within 1 year of our death, 90% of what was connected to our life has been dispersed or gone. Within 10 years of our death, 99% of what was connected to our life that was connected to Michael Wynne, or Mr. Bertrand, or Mr. Phillips, or anybody else, is gone. 99 within 10 years. What do you think is going to be around about you 40 years, 50 years from now? But in doing the research for some of these books and stuff, I researched and looked at books that were over 100 years old. I think the oldest was 170 years old. I pulled information out of. They're books, these books that these people wrote who's long been dust. These books are still on shelves. My legacy, other than my wonderful children and grandson, my legacy is these books. Long after I'm gone, they're still going to be on the shelf. People will still be opening them and laughing or enjoying or researching. What is your legacy? What is your end game? If I ask you a question and you say your end game is I'm a research, that's not an end game. What do you plan to do with your stuff? Now, I was talking to somebody earlier in this, before I started to talk, and they said nobody's interested in your stuff. That's not true. There's always somebody interested. You have to look. There's archives. My stuff, it didn't go to one archive. I carefully selected archives, and I'm dispersing my stuff right now. After I've published, my written word has been published. Most of my picture books are published. I can't entrust my children with all the crap I've saved all these years, a room full of stuff. I'm bringing it down to my grandparents on down as stuff. Even my mother's letters, the thousands of letters, they're going to either USL or LSU archives before Christmas because they need to be preserved. I cannot rely on people coming after me, cleaning up the house after I'm dead. What is your end game? What is your legacy? You can't just have, well, I'm going to donate all my stuff in folders to this archives or this genealogical library. I work at the Alexandria Genealogical Library. We cringe when some poor fool has donated boxes and boxes of stuff. We fortunately have this big, unaired, roach-infested room where stuff is put. And we take it because we feel obligated. We put it in there. Nobody ever looks at it. Who's going to go look through somebody else's folders of just photocopies and cut out newspaper clippings? I don't save newspaper clippings. Newspapers were meant to last only one day. Because they've got phosphorus in it, which is very dangerous. It destroys the paper. That's what makes it yellow when the sunlight hits it. I always photocopy it on quality paper. I throw away the original newspaper. It's the photocopy which is much more likely to last. I just mentioned that in passing. But all these boxes of stuff people donated, they just accepted about 2 months ago 6 boxes of stuff. And one person whispered to me, we're going to keep it a few years and we're going to throw it away because we don't have space for all this people's folders of stuff. And that's the truth. Who's going to want your stuff, of your boxes of folders of photocopies and cut out newspaper clippings? You've got to assemble them. Now, I talked about teaching classes. Now, I've had many persons like 60s and 70s and even 80s, they walk into class, it's too late for me to do anything. it's too late. Well, they're totally wrong. I tell them this, and I'm gonna walk up to this young lady in the back row. What if I walked up to you and said, this is a book written by your mother. It's all her memories of her childhood, her school, her parents and everything. And I said, would you like to have this? Would this be the most precious book you've ever been given?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Well, guess
Jewelry
what?
doesn't matter, none of that material
None of that
stuff
matters.
matters.
You can replace jewelry.
That's right.
Money, how much money are you gonna have in the coffin with you? Now, that book, just the memories of your mother, or your grandmother, or your grandfather, you would agree that would be the most valuable book you could write. I would assume most of y'all have children or descendants, or maybe even nieces and nephews. Guess what? Pull yourself away from the TV 1/2 hour a day. 1/2 hour. One of the stupid TV shows that I watch too, pull yourself away. Today, I'm going to spend 1/2 hour writing about what I remember about my father. Tomorrow, I'm going to write what I remember about my mother. Wednesday, I'm going to spend a 1/2 hour writing about what I remember about my father's father. Thursday, I'm going to write what I remember about school. Friday, I'm going to write about my memories of being raised in Opelousas. You don't even have to type it on a computer. You can handwrite it. You write it in a school notebook. Your memories. The stuff up here is a whole lot more valuable than any census record, any book about your family, or anything else. This is stuff that every second of every day is lost. You have it in your own mind. I don't care if you think that you don't know anything. You know a hell of a lot. Every one of you. Just a 1/2 hour every day, one television program. Write about it. And that will become the most precious book in the world to your children. Now you say, yeah, oh my goodness, I can't type, I handwrite it, and I got six children. That's fine. There's somebody who can scan your handwritten pages and publish it in 17 minutes for you. You don't have to write 1,000 pages. How about do 20 pages? I see these old-time little genealogy books, the personal memories of Annie Mae Williams. I just donated one to the Genealogical Library the other day. It's just somebody's personal memory. They used to do that a lot in the 30s and 40s and 50s. We don't do that as much anymore. Just these little personal things. It's just somebody's memories. No research is involved. You don't need to go to documents, look up the obituary. You can write that. Even, I'm just saying, you don't have to have any genealogy on it. You can do that. And it one day will be the most valuable thing somebody will have. I would love to have, can you imagine if our grandparents, any of our grandparents, had written their memories of their childhood? I've had to go jump through hoops imaginable to find records, particularly of our grandfather, Henry Whip. He was a shoe cobbler here in Opelousas. He left very little footprints in this world. There's some courthouse documents. There's one letter in existence that he typed on my mother's computer, on typewriter, but he left very little footprints behind. But I've gotten a lot of memories. My brother's provided memories, a lot of people, and I've published it in the book. Memories are so much, we can always look up those 1930 census records and the marriage license from 1918. The memories are what is truly history. You know, do you really want to buy a history book just for names, places, and dates? No. You want the memories, the stories. Even if they're a little, some of them are exaggerated or, you know, even made up in some cases. You still want the memories because it brings you back in time. And that's what's great about pictures. It's not that any one picture is great, it brings you back in time. So what I would like to leave as a thought today to everybody is, what is your end game for yourself? You're not living forever. I'm not even fully prepared. I've given away 40% or 45% of my stuff already, or actually much more than that. I'm just about complete with my picture books, and then I'm gonna work on some other subjects. I'm getting as close as I can to have a complete air game. I'm not ready yet, but I've set dates. That's another thing about it. You gotta set dates. Just saying, I'm gonna do it one day is not an end game. You say, by Friday of this week, I'm gonna accomplish the following. What else is so important? It doesn't take, compared to our old folks from the 19th century who spent the entire day cleaning clothes, raising a farm, preparing food, just basic. We have nothing to do. Pop it in the microwave, let the dishwasher do the dishes. We have tons of time to ourselves. We really don't have car to drive everywhere. We really don't have any excuse. Everybody, I just hope that you think about doing an end game. Now, you say you're not completed with your research. When are you going to be completed? 50 years from now? 100 years from now? 75 years from now? Go ahead and say, how about today you finish you say, today, or Sunday, I'm finished with my research. And write what you do have. Compile what you do have. I bet you may not even finish that in time for a book. I'm just saying, what are you waiting for? Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to mention. Publishing.
Real quick on the publishing, Kindle requires a minimum of 10 pages. And the reason it takes time for you to get your book, they don't keep a copy like this sitting on a shelf. When you order these from Kindle Direct Publishing, regardless of whose book, they have to pull their copy and print it. That's why it takes the 14 days from the time you order it till you get it, because these are not sitting on a shelf. They're sitting in their computer storage warehouse. So say you ordered one of these today, it doesn't matter what service you've got for that, it's going to take 14 days.
2 years ago when I spoke, I had told everybody I used to write a column for the Opelousas Daily World on genealogy, and I asked anybody to raise their hand, and nobody remembered it. I brought copies of my column just as proof today. The Heritage of St. Landry. There's me, they even made a drawing.
What's the date on that?
That's 1981. Here's a note from I'm going to read this final note, then I'm going to open up the questions. It's from Jacqueline Olivier Verdrine. It's dated January 31st, 1981. Dear Mr. Wynne, welcome to the Daily World. I'm delighted your column will be featured! Exclamation point. I'm at this moment in the midst of moving my parents from a large home to a small home. So no time to check on the Beam descendants. And she started talking about the Bim family. So I just want to mention I did actually write a column for the Daily World.
I didn't know that either.
I was out of town then, I didn't know that.
Okay, so I brought proof.
Yeah, in the early 80s, he wrote for lots of small weekly papers.
Now, do you have a collection of those columns?
Right here. It's my only set.
It's in which book?
Oh, I haven't published them.
That's what I was asking.
I would have to retype the columns to put in the, I guess I could scan them.
That's how I typed you.
Okay, I promise, I'll do this. Before the end, by November, I'm setting a deadline. Number one, set a deadline. By November, I will scan all my columns and publish them in a book and donate one to the St. Landry.
That's
So,
Okay?
I'm done, that's what we need.
And the only reason I'm delaying is I want to finish the picture books, which I should have finished by September.
Which picture book now you speak?
I'm finishing up with my father's family.
Okay.
And we have a wedding in November
And-
he's forgetting about.
Yes. So I have not forgotten.
In another state.
No, you know what he says, it's your, he's
No.
gonna let you worry about it.
No, it's our son, but it's,
No, but he's gonna let you worry about
but he
it.
lives hours away
In
and
another
it's
state.
in another state.
Well, in any regard with everything that's been added, I'll have it published by November and we'll hand deliver a copy over here.
So,
I'd like to open up any questions or anything. I'm not sure if I offered anything of any use. Yes, ma'am?
I'd just like to make a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
This young lady is 80 years old. I've been interested in family history since I was probably about 8 or 9 years old. My paternal grandmother was unschooled. I'm not going to call her illiterate. She could neither read nor write, but she was just unschooled. She spoke only French. But even she knew the value of knowing your family's history. And it was she who encouraged me to write everything that she told me about family. And that's the basis of all the research that I've done, what I've tried to preserve for my children. I'm in the process right now, and like you, I set a deadline. I've had some health issues in the last few months, and I determined in April of this year that it was time for me to stop the research, start writing, and I have
I want to shake your hand,
accumulated
because you did the right.
over the
Stop the
years.
research, start the publishing.
As of this time, no, I'm not going to publish, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because in my husband's family, which would be my children's family, there are still some living members. And they really, really value their privacy. And there are certain things which are the truth, and I want my children to know them. They're not to be made public.
Why don't
So-
you write them up and just give them to your children?
That's what I'm doing. I have a book. What I'm doing is to, I'm doing them on the computer, and I'm doing what you've done with the scanning of the pictures, and it's very, very difficult to go through all of these picture albums and trying to decide which ones to include, and to be able to include the stories that are from my perspective about each person. But I have printed them out. I'm doing my children, my husband and I, and then our parents and our grandparents and their siblings, our parents' siblings, and if possible, the grandparents. But I'm working progressively. I have a loose leaf binder with the plastic inserts, so that there's a page that's
Perfect.
back to back.
Never touch the
And
pictures.
I've
plastic
allowed
is-
my daughter to read it as I progress. She sat enthralled with it for an hour and a half. And at that time, it was just the beginning of it. And she had tears in her eyes. She said, "Mama, now at last I know who these people were. And I understand. And it's only because you include the personal stories. And I feel that even if something happens to me today, my daughter or my son can pick up where I've left off, because I'm doing everything with bookmarks, and they can go to the research that I've accumulated on their aunts and uncles, the great aunts, great uncles. But anyway, you're speaking you're preaching my gospel.
You sound like you're ahead of the game.
You're
I
preaching my
congratulate-
gospel.
I congratulate you.
All of that research going back to the 8th century and all that, they lose interest. It's too complicated for them. Even a simple 5-generation family chart, most of them cannot
Because it's
understand them.
names, dates, and places.
They cannot understand
Nobody
them.
cares about names, dates, and
Case in point, I went to visit my sister this week because I wanted her to at least see what I was trying to do. And she just flips through the charts because she cannot understand them. And I've tried to explain to her, well, it's really very simple. You start with yourself, we all know the routine, but they just don't want to do it.
Some genealogists are arrogant. I'm gonna say I'm arrogant, but I've learned to get beyond that, because we get all this chart stuff and census and all this. The public doesn't understand or care about it. They just want the biographies. The biographies, which include stories and transcribed letters. Transcribed letters are the most important. My brother found or came across girlfriend letters he had that he kept, and it's a great story behind it. My mother would throw it away.
Girls wrote me letters, I would read them, throw them in the trash can.
Uh-huh,
My
so
mother
your mother
took them out of the trash can, read them, and saved them.
Although my brother has, and I've taken all the letters and put them into plastic sleeves because he doesn't need to handle them anymore. Unfortunately, when he was dating, that is now ancient history, and the letters are falling apart. And I know it's a personal connection to my brother, but this is history. These letters tell so much about his life when he was a young man, that his children, he's got grandchildren, and one day he's going to have, maybe he won't be around, but he's going to have great-grandchildren. This stuff will be the most priceless legacy that he will have. These letters, although he did give away some letters, one day to his descendants. Yeah, all this is so important, and you are so ahead of the game. You're working your damnedest to get it all ready, and I understand the privacy issue. But yes, you're going to leave a legacy that long after you're gone will still be around.
I hope so.
You know what the difference between her family and our family is?
I don't know.
None of our family had done anything that we're ashamed of.
Oh, good for you. No, but it's not their shame, it's just
He's making a
that
joke.
Yeah.
these events were so traumatic that they have affected some living members where they have never really truly gotten over it.
I understand.
And you know, I don't want to intrude on that.
And you are very right on that.
But couldn't you publish
No,
without,
I'm not interested right now. I'm at the stage, Estelle, where I just want to put things in an organized manner with my blueprint on it, so that my daughter, I know that my daughter can take that, and if she chooses, because I have a grandson who is an attorney, and he's very much interested in history. So I feel that if anyone can do it, one of them will do it. But I want to give them the foundation.
and that's the key thing.
I want the truth in it. I don't want congestion. And that's my reason for it.
So I would like everybody to, only one thing you leave here today is to think about what is your end game on all the hundreds or thousands of hours. And whether you have only a little bit, I know Estelle told me how much she's lost over the years, or if you have a lot. Everything you have, even if it's down to one picture or one letter, is worth preserving. Where is it going to go after you're gone? Have you actually talked to somebody? Have you made plans? And that's the one thing I want to leave. Any other questions or comments or criticisms? I'll take that. Well, thank you all very much. It's been an honor to speak before you. And I thank Mr. Bertrand for filming. I don't know if I broke his camera. I don't know if anybody would want to watch this, but I think I enjoyed it. Maybe in 2 or 3 years, I'll come back with some more books.
well, I hope it's going to be more than that. We're getting ready to celebrate our 300th birthday.
That's
And
all.
what you said today would really be wonderful to be giving over at the Delta Theater to a group from the whole parish about preserving our history.
Estelle, you schedule me, I'll go.
I get these calls, and it's Miss Perrault, do you have my file? Now, they're interested in wanting to know something about it, but they're too lazy sometimes, or they don't care. And they have in mind, so often, the name and the date. That's not what in genealogy or family history we're looking for. We're looking for the people.
The people.
We
the
want to know
biographies.
what they thought. We want to know what they did. We
The
want to
letters.
know how they reached out to each other. We want to know the humanity that was shown. And to try and get people to understand, it's not just a name and a date. That doesn't ring my bell.
I'm going to go ahead and give one more story if y'all will
I'll go.
hold it. I'll keep it less than 4 minutes.
That's
Because I
fine.
told it 2 years ago, and Mr. Bertrand's recording this, and maybe y'all would like to hear. One of the things I learned in the 1970s was of this. I was taken by my grandmother over to St. Landry Catholic Church Cemetery, and there's just gigantic tomb. It's It's 20 feet across. It's just big as flat. It's several stones. And 4 of the people are all together in one row. And they all have the same death date. And I said, what's all that about? And one of them was my great-great-grandmother, Ermina Bourdelaw Bim Gosselin. And I said, what's that about? My grandmother told me, oh, that's when they all killed by the train wreck. I said, what train wreck? And she told me a little bit about what she remembered, but by the 70s, it had been over 50 years and she was ailing. So I pulled up the newspaper, which was the Opelousas Courier at that time before the Daily World, and I see the newspaper record. And basically, my great-great-uncle, a fellow named Willie Beam, was driving the car with 2 aunts and my great-great-grandmother, and my great-uncle Clifford Beam was on the running board at the ford. And they were crossing the train track and a train hit them in Lawtell. But I said, you know, I've crossed the train track all the time. I can pretty much avoid a car. Even if my car, proverbial like in a movie, stalls out, and you've seen that in television shows, movies, stalls out in the train, you can get out of the car. And remember, there was no top to the car, there was no windows. There's no way you could not get out of the car for a train. I said, what's going on? And I actually, when I saw it was Opelousas Courier, I went and checked the Lafayette Advertiser, which was founded in 1865, so it existed then, and it was in there. And I checked, the New Orleans Times-Picayune didn't actually exist then, it was the Times-Democrat, and it was in there. And I went ahead and checked the New York Times, and it was on the front page of the New York Times. I said, and everybody with 4 people was dead, but there was the young boy on the running board, my great-uncle Clifford Bim, who lived in Port Arthur, and he was still alive. This was 1970s. So my mother and I drove over to Port Arthur, and I talked to my family history. Of course, it was actually the last time I ever saw him alive. So my rule, number 1, when you visit a relative, it's the last time you're ever going to see him. We visited my wife's aunt, Carmen Wheeler, in El Campo, Texas, one afternoon. She died that night. One of the most remarkable, my rule has always been a very good rule. So we drove over to Port Arthur, Texas, and when I finally brought up about the train wreck, and he started crying. Now, it had occurred 55 years earlier, but he started crying. And he told me what happened. My great-uncle was coming over the tracks, and actually the railroad curved right there, and there was trees. So if a train was coming, you could hear it. But when they were crossing the track, the wind was blowing the other way, so it helped, it prevented the sound from coming. I don't fully understand it, but what happened was when he got up on the tracks, the slope was like this, and the car actually caught on the tracks and kind of stalled out. And finally, they saw the train, and they had a few seconds, but Ermina, who was a very old woman at the time, the others could jump out of the car, but she was old and fat, and they were kind of trying to move her, and she had trouble moving. So Willie, the driver of the car, was trying to start the car. So he pulled the choke, and he thought he was pulling the choke, but there were 2 people. And I actually talked to him, Lee McClellan from Lawtell. He had an insurance firm. I don't know if anybody remembers him. Yeah, well, Lee McClellan, he's probably been dead a long time. I actually interviewed him also. He was watching the car, and he saw the headlights come on just before the train cut the car in half and cut all their bodies in half. What happened, Uncle Clifford told me, the last words he said before we left him in Port Arthur, he was trying to pull the choke, and he was so scared, he pulled the headlights on. The headlights go on, and it was too late, and the car was cut in half, and they were all killed. So I went and reinvestigated this horrible tragedy 55 years later, and was able to find out the true story I actually got the coroner's inquest from the St. Landry Parish Courthouse, and there was nothing, they didn't really care. They said, 4 people died, there was no murderer, that was it. The autopsies were actually conducted in the house next door to the train track. So I got the whole, one of these pages right here, the whole true story of the great train crash, basically, of 1925. So it's just interesting, 55 years later, after it actually occurred, you can still unravel mysteries. So that's the only story I'm going to repeat now. I'll stop there and shut up because I can obviously talk all day long.
Enjoy.
So unless there's any questions, thank you all very much for allowing me to speak, and I hope you have
Thank you.
Mr. Phillips.
I'd like to make one remark, if you don't mind.
Please,
I
please.
think a history course maybe 50 years ago, Professor said we might criticize 3 or 4 generations ahead of us, maybe 5 generations ahead of us. We criticize those people. I took a history course about 50 years ago.
Yes.
The professor said, today we may criticize people who were here 50, 60, 70 years ago, and criticize the way they react about things. But 50 years from now, you're going to criticize us how we are today. So back to your father, don't feel bad about that. That was happening today.
Absolutely.
Through.
Can you imagine how
We
much?
might, what we're doing today, people, if you're going to criticize us, we're doing wrong.
Can you imagine how much criticism we're going to get 25 years ago of what's going on today? My goodness, I hate to even say I lived during these times. But thank you all very much, and I will shut up.
Well,
Thank you.
I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Thank you.
I need to get you to come back.
I will be happy if you want to speak at the Delta Theater. I'll be happy.
Well, let me see if I can't set up something in our schedule, because too many people